we're here this week in Mutant Worlds, and we're like really excited because we have today a bunch of special guests, and we're gonna talk about LGBTQ plus mutants, which is like obviously our favorite topic ever. And we have RO STEIN TED BRANDT, the artists and designers of ESCAPADE, Marvel's brand new trans mutant that we absolutely adore, and we're gonna get into all the reasons why we adore her and her story. And we also have with us Rhayne for CAREFREE BLACK NERD. Like, we love Rhayne. You all know Rhayne by this point. If you don't, that doesn't make sense. And we have the usuals. We have Travis and Gabriel, and I'm Duna. And there's one person more that is gonna join in a minute sometime. And that's gonna be all of us. And we're gonna talk like all the queer mutants. This is gonna be super fun. So get ready.
This week on Mutant Watch.
Okay, so the first thing that I wanna ask every one of you, just to get into the point, because like we do these shows every year, and we like talk about like how we see things in the Marvel universe in regards to LGBTQ plus representation. And I feel like this past year, since the last show that we did, a bunch of things have happened, have changed. We have way more like storylines now. We have like really iconic characters like Mystic and Destiny, who we made a whole show about a couple of weeks ago. And we have like some like promising things coming forward. So I just want to ask you all, every one of you, which is your favorite like kind of queer storyline that is happening right now in the comics, and what, like, how do you see like the general picture also, like what, just a general like, I really like this one, but also I'm also following this other thing, and I like how it does this or that. That would be like my first question for every one of you.
I have like 3 different things that I'm loving right now, so I don't want to go first and just cover everything. So I'd rather go last and just jump in and be like, I agree with all these people, but also.
I can't really answer the question because I do not read enough comics to have an answer.
And I mean, like I've been getting I've been keeping up with the X stuff all through the trades. So the Reign of X trades. So I've just gotten to the gala. I'm way behind.
Oh, so you're like where we were last year. I mean, you
Yep.
both had a lot to answer escapade stories. Like, you can. But yeah.
So out of curiosity, since you said you're up to the gala, is there any storylines that you're hopeful for? Kind of like with this view into the past?
Like, I'm very excited for the return of Madeline Pryor. Like, that, you know, Inferno, yeah, I'm a massive fan of the original, so very excited to get to that by this time next year.
Yeah, it's not gonna disappoint you, I can assure you. And so Eric just arrived. ERIK OJO, the Ken Smith, the whole thing is on the comments and the descriptions. What we were asking, Eric, just so you know, is for everyone to kind of say one of their favorite queer storylines that are happening right now or that are gonna happen, something like that. And yeah, one of their favorites and kind of what other things. you're like looking forward?
Yeah. I think my favorite one, like just default that comes to mind, is Raven and Irene, of course. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about like the rest that is going on. Maybe I'm just like not personally invested with the characters that are involved, but I'm really excited to see where Raven and Irene go.
Oh. See.
Oh, and also I'm very interested. I'm very, very interested to see with Shella or Jayla. I'm not sure which one, but
Yeah, I think for me right now, because I'm way behind on several of the books, and there's a couple I'll probably never get around to reading. I'm not good with serial comics, which is a shame. But I'm really happy with like New Mutants and a couple other books that are very tonally queer. Even the characters who aren't explicitly queer, it's a queer comic, very blatantly so. And that kind of fills me with a little more energy than we get to finally say a character who's been around 20 or 30 years is queer. These kind of late outings, they're good in their way, but they're less exciting to me than a book that just feels fully committed to presenting, I think, queer community in a way. The Krakoa stuff feels so much just like a certain kind of Americana made into an island and then called a revolutionary culture that I get really turned off really quickly. And so the parts that look like a queer neighborhood to me, or even just a neighborhood I would live in, I get a lot more excited by that. And so that's what I'm looking forward to right now more than anything when I go to the monthly books.
I would probably have to agree. So I'm a bit behind as well, but for me, I think the explicit nature of the like the on-page queerness is more of a interesting thing to me because there was so much kind of shipping and whatnot, like way back in the day when you couldn't explicitly say this person is with this person like that. So I think I would probably feel the same because I'm not, to be quite honest, 100% invested in anyone. And that bothers me a bit, but it's just the fact that it's there. And these stories are explicit and available for people who were, when I was coming up, my age, it wasn't. So I don't know. I think it's something about just being able to point to a page and say this is gay, and not like and you can of course get pushback because people are always going to complain and argue. But when you can factually say no, you can see on panel this is holding hands, kissing, love story, like that, to me, I guess it's more of something I'm excited for, even if it's not a particular maybe couple or person. But I love that because everybody's gay. Everyone's queer.
For me, I am absolutely over the moon for the Irene and Raven storyline we have coming. It is going to hurt. I already know that they are going to hurt us with it, but it's going to be a story for them, which is not something they've had in the past. And then the other two things I'm most excited for is Tempo in Marauders. This was a character that has spent so long under the radar, and then like 10 years ago, we get a line that implies that she might be queer, and now Steve Orlando is taking that, and the first time we see her in Marauders, it's her getting dumped by a girl that she's bored of, and it is such it's awesome to see it finally there on page. And the final thing that I'm super excited about is Knights of X. We have in this past week, they fed us well, and we have this very touching scene between Richter and Shatterstar, who are finally reunited, talking about what they mean to each other. and acknowledging also whatever that weirdness was with Apocalypse. But what I find more important, and hopefully I'm praying this is what I'm hopeful for, that we're going to get there, is there is a very, very queer moment between Betsy and Rachel. And we have it clear on page that Betsy is queer, but Rachel has been like subtext forever. And like you were saying, it would be so nice to be able to point and be able to look and have people be able to see that representation and shut up the people who are arguing against it, because it's there without any ability to be taken back.
Yeah.
Well, I think, and that's kind of my fear always, or one of the reasons I hold back from particular relationships in X stuff, is they can always walk it back. And we've seen them walk stuff back, or they were possessed, they were joking. That's just what friends do. Rhayne and Cat's Eye back in New Mutants, when they go to the party at the Hellfire Club and they immediately get naked and go run around together all happy, and they're like, that's just what friends do. You know, you're 15, you see your friend you haven't seen in 3 weeks, you get naked and you take off in the woods. That's not gay. Like, there's no physical, there's no words that they can't take away from us if they feel like it, and they'll do it in a text page. But I got so mad at the Pride issue. I love the Pride issue, but I got so mad at the text pages in that, because they do it there. They do some queer erasure in that text page, and why even choose that? You know, but okay. Anyway.
You see, but that's why that's one of the reasons, like you said, is they walk back. That's just what friends do, is what weird things that they say to explain it away. But when you look at Betsy Braddock, yes, they just stopped talking about her queerness for a long time, but there was no walking back the fact that she was in bed making out with another woman. And there was no taking back the fact that she had conversations with Storm referring to Cluster as a past relationship, using female pronouns for her. Like, that is something they have not been able to walk back from. Yes, they can hide it, they can bury it, but it's still there. And I so desperately want more of that.
Yeah.
So, like, the queer moment between Betsy and Rachel that we got this week, they were just close friends. It can be walked back from, but I'm really hoping that Howard will take it that step further, so that way it is in canon written, you know, I'm gay for you. Like, I want it so bad.
Yeah. I have similar feelings, and I'm thinking of what I'm most excited about. I'm excited about a lot of things, because like I'm really, really excited about Raven and Irene, as you all are. I'm also like excited, but in a concerning way, because they keep giving us like drama, and I'm like, you know, as a lesbian, I love drama, but also I don't want those two to like just, you know, someone dying again and then having some other years of like, I wouldn't like that. But I trust Kieron Gillen to not end there. I trust that he's just giving me a wild ride. And to be honest, the thing I'm most excited about right now is ESCAPADE. Like, it's the new character, Isela, it's ESCAPADE. Because we haven't had this in X Comics at all. Like, before this, that short story in the anthology, which, by the way, when I read it, the first thing I thought was like, I wish there would have been like issue 1 of a book, because like it had like a lot of potential. It not only potential because it gave what it wanted to give. It's not like potential in that way, but it has like a lot of like great story coming material. which I get why it's an anthology because it makes the anthology shine so much more. But I'm like, I already want like for next month to have the next story of Escapade. Like that's my, because we rarely get characters, and I think we can expand. All of you probably have like some position on this, and we can expand later when we talk about like representation in a more broader way. But we rarely get characters that have like their queerness or their oppression in some other way that is not mutanthood being like a really important part of the story, being something that is very, very centered. And I just love those panels. And now I'm gonna like gush over, so sorry, Roanted. But like I just love those panels with the Peanuts style thing, with them being like little children and talking to each other. They're not only they're adorable, but they're like something that I haven't seen in a Marvel comic in my life. And it's just trans children existing and also having issues that I can relate to a lot, which is something that usually with mutant books, it's more like you have to like, you have your experience and you have to like so horn it into the book to like, you know, read into the mutant metaphor. And like, yeah, I can see myself there in some way. But in this case, it's not that. It's really like the experience of trans children, which is very similar to things that I have talked with friends before going into that closet that I went after that. And like it's just magical for me that we get to have that, because I wasn't really hopeful. This show that we're doing today was gonna be completely different, and I was gonna be like grumpy and mad at everyone, if not for Escapade. Because you know, because like as much as I love that we're having like a lot of LGBTQ plus storylines, and we're having couples, and we're having Raven and Erin, and we're having Salazar and Richter, and we're having probably Betsy and Rachel, and we're having like all of these things, and we're having more others, which is like a fun book, but everyone is queer there, so we have a lot of potential. But we didn't have any trans story at all. And the few characters that we had that were trans didn't have trans stories that were not in the 90s. Like now, trans stories now, like Jesse Drake, or like the characters that Vita Ayala marvelously created for New Mutants. All of them seem amazing, but none of them had a storyline where you can like. And I'm also hopeful that they will at some point. Like I'm also like just waiting for that also. But the I think really what makes me more excited is that we're finally getting a storyline with a trans character in which the transness matters, but the story is also super interesting, because it's a story about like kind of my favorite stories. And I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and going on a tangent here, but my favorite stories are the one about like how you can like make yourself responsible for the choices that you make, or how you can like improve yourself, and how these are like flawed people that we can like relate to. And that storyline with Seda and with that it just clicked for me. Like I was there for it.
It was for me the anti-North Star screaming "I am gay." I mean, even right now, 2022, so many storylines that come up. If it's a trans character, they have trans powers. They have a trans costume. They have a trans arc that is this very structured for a specific non-trans audience. If you have a gay character come out right now, the gayness is the story arc and the story shape. And we see this with certain other characters that I'm not going to name because I don't want to trash the people working. I don't know that. I have to be clear. I don't blame a writer or an artist or an editor or whoever that works on these. If there's a storyline that seems very commercially structured or very careful or pulls back, I know that can come from way above an editor. that you have to dial this back, or this thing you're developing can't happen. So I don't want to blame anybody for any of these that happen, but it happens with so many characters and so many books that story, it just made me happy that it was this fully structured thing with its own structure and its own plot that did not, it reflected on everything about the characters, but it wasn't a cell in the same way.
And I think that it's one of the reasons why I really love the Voices book that we had, is not just Escapade, but also the LGBTD one. It's these characters, and the moment I finished reading it, I run to a group text, and it's already people being like, "Oh, this character we only got 3 lines for. This is me," or "This character is a vibe." And like, I had to take like a little screenshot of one of the characters introducing themselves, and I'm like, I relate to this so badly. And it feels like it's something made by and for queer people, and it's so refreshing.
The Matt Baker shout out made me so happy, because finally I'm the first person, I'm not the only person that keeps saying this, because as some of you who watch the show know, when we have guests on, like every second time I'm on here, I bring up Matt Baker again. And the arguments from Matt Baker not being queer are the worst arguments ever. They're like, well, I don't think he could be queer because he draws really pretty clothes on women. And I don't think he was queer because he had a lot of women friends, and he never seemed to date or marry any of them, but he hung out with women a lot, and then he lived with these guys. And that's why I don't think he was gay. And I'm like, that's the worst argument ever. But there are a lot of older, he died fairly young and quite a while ago. And there are a lot of older comics people, older comics pros, who we keep in the closet. And there are some that we keep right now, and it's because they have living relatives or living friends who would prefer, and to honor them, we have to keep quiet about that. And that's horrible. I mean, it's genuinely horrible. But because you see conversations come up, and it's not just in comics, it's in other, anybody, your neighborhood, other fields, but it's a horrible secret to have to keep. But we have to. And so when we're allowed finally to just say somebody was gay, or somebody was queer, or somebody was trans, that's huge for me. And, the Marvel book doesn't really do it in a loud way. They name a youth center after him, but it meant the world to me. That was a huge thing for me.
That's so bad. Yeah, that trans support group, like I also, when I read that, I was like, all of these are mutants. I'm sorry, but like trans people, like for me, they're mutants now. They're all mutants. I'm just claiming them for the show, especially Pretty Girl.
Yes.
I do need Good Arson to have a new name, because like the Asgardian, I'm gonna forever read that as Good Arson. It's really uncomfortable for me. So they pick a new name. I know they probably think that's funny, the character, but that's like when you're on Twitter and somebody like comes on and you realize like they're like supposed to be very young, and so it feels very weird to me because it's a young character especially. But watch your names, create new characters, watch your names.
Absolutely.
I really love how like it all feels like very like lived in, like with that support group and Shella, and it just like feels like these, because like we were like you were saying before, how it feels like characters of multiple marginalizations have to kind of like tell their stories to the mutant metaphor, even though their marginalizations are not metaphorical or fantastical. But with this story, it felt like both of those things were like side by side, things that existed together. And I think like something that really like highlighted that was how Shayla's parents accepted that she was a mutant, but not that she was trans. And I think that's something that is like very real. And we have like had like I guess similar things like that with Bobby, though. I guess I'm not entirely sure if they ever accepted that he was a mutant, but just like seeing that was like it gave me a lot of hope for further stories, because I don't know, we just like need more of that. And I especially like see that kind of like hope in New Mutant. So I'm very happy to know that Shayla's going to turn up in New Mutant specifically, because I feel like that's a book that is doing a lot of just like really important work. Read that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, and there was another comic not too long ago that played it as a joke, but they had the parents react poorly for a half, panel or two or whatever, and the kid gets scared, and then ha ha ha. Of course, we're very liberal parents, la la la. We wouldn't, and it's like, no, you're assholes for doing that to your kid, is what you are.
Oh, that was
but-
Children of the Atom, I think.
But there
But yeah.
are, I think sometimes we get too witty as creative artists, and we forget that these characters have to live these experiences. And with that story, with the Pride story, it felt like lived experiences, even when it goes very cartoony and does the Peanut style art for the flashbacks. That made it feel more real.
Absolutely. That's something that I loved. And more than I realized, because me personally, I felt like this gives a space to do more than just a 22-page comic, because I can clearly see, now I don't know if this is the plan, but I can see a full, maybe even 4 or 5 pages of just nothing but this. Like, we already have the text in the Dawn of X that we're now conditioned to read a prose book and a comic. But this right here, I feel like it's so relatable. And I hope I'm explaining this well enough. I feel like when it comes to LGBTQ issues, when you look to media, it's been very problematic in the past, and a lot of things that may be seen as overdone or social justice word or whatever is framed in a way that people who are not a part of this community are more able to relate or accept certain aspects that are like, oh, commercially accepted. Gay swimsuit rainbows and turning your logo to pride. But I think with this, it feels as if, no, this is just a regular thing in a comic. This Peanuts thing that everybody, your grandparents down to your nieces and nephews, can recognize that art. And in turn, reading that story, independent of because it, like, I'm reading it by itself, and it's like 2 stories at once. And I'm like, because I don't even have to read the present day, and I'm reading this. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling, but this to me feels like it's more, kind of, not acceptable. What is the word I'm looking for? I think it reaches a larger audience because, one, the art is so jarring from what you get in a regular comic. 2, is that Peanuts art that you're already familiar with, no matter who you are. And then 3, it's telling this own independent story side by side with present day, where, like, you could give this for everybody. Oh, think about the children. You could give the Peanuts portion to a child and say, hey, look, so I loved it. I'm trying not to. Yeah, I loved it. So kudos.
I definitely think that doing it was like a visual shorthand. We see the Peanuts art, and it's something that so many people are so familiar with. We instantly get the tone, we get the vibe, we get like kind of the feel for it, like the Peanuts, and it introduces these serious issues that we build up. And just like you said, like the visual comparison to when Sheila is talking about coming out as a mutant and the parents are fine with it, and then the visual of when she's explaining that she came out as trans and how bad it was. And it just creates this like kind of like shorthand where it's only this like 3-panel, like a newspaper comic strip at the bottom of the page, and it delivers all of the information that it needs to deliver so quickly. So it doesn't need a whole comic. in order to give this backstory, because
Right.
we get what it's saying, which is I'm guessing what the newspaper comic strips had to do, because you only get 3 panels to deliver this whole story. And it delivered that here as well in completely unexpected, but very grateful.
Yeah, and I think also like taking on Rhayne's and Gabriel's points, I think like the fact that you both use like that Peanuts style, it's like I think it's especially poignant when we're talking about trans characters, because right now trans children are being like really like stripped out of their agency and demonized in a lot of places. And I think it's like really, really like artistically like an incredible choice to choose something that we all already associate with like this type of like more like directed to children or like related to our childhood type of like visual thing, to tell the story of these trans children, because it like kind of like humanizes them. Like it because we associate the Peanuts style, we associate a lot of other things like Mafalda and a lot of other artists from the newspapers with like children learning the ethical questions of the war. Like that's one of the things that the newspaper that did these stories post and created there. So when we see trans children learning both like forming a community within themselves, because this is the 2 children are like he's offering his house to Sela,
Right.
and that's like what happens in the story, and also learning difficult things about the world they live in, just like they do in the newspaper's strip. It kind of humanizes the trans children. It kind of like makes it more easily to see them as they are, children. Which I think now it's super important. So like that, wow, that for me that like was like a super like really clever choice of like visual style, because like because like there's not much things you can do to like take back and humanize people that are being dehumanized, and this is a really, really good way of like connecting that to what a lot of adults already associate with like those themes. So yeah,
Well,
to that.
and it was really surreal to me. We don't see in X-Men especially, you know, or mutant stuff, the mutancy so often is the minority role. That when you have a mutant who is a minority in another way or disenfranchised in another way, they don't know anyone else from their background ever. And this was one of those rare times where you had 2 characters come in who share more than just one thing in common. And I don't know that that's actually happened before, which is really weird. Like I started racking my brain for characters, and they really go out of their way. And that's always the argument among some readers too, some audiences, is, well, it doesn't make sense. Like if you have a team and they're all queer, it doesn't make sense if the whole team is queer, because why would all these queer people hang out together? Or it doesn't make sense that Storm knows another Black person, period, ever. That wouldn't make sense. Where would she meet another Black person? In New York or in Africa? So that was a simple thing. It's a very small thing, but it tripped me out to think, I don't know that that's necessarily happened before, and not immediately introducing a character.
And that's all kinds of special outrageous. I can't even remember the last time I made a new straight friend. I don't even know where to find them anymore. Like
where they hang out. I guess in like football bars or something.
One thing about the Peanuts thing that I think was really interesting was that, like, when I first like saw it and like noted it was going to be a thing that was happening, and like realized that like it's about them as kids and like what they went through like before this story, I felt almost I don't know, it's sort of like a relief almost, because so often in like stories about like coming out or anything like that, or even like the mutant metaphor stories, so often it is like full of like pain and suffering and kind of like voyeurism of like the whole traumatic experience, rather than being about like the people themselves. Kind of like a kind of, I don't know, just like very strange. But in seeing that it was in this Peanut style, and like it just like made me feel like, okay, I'm not gonna like see like I'm not gonna see like parental like physical abuse in these like pages about this.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is also something that I think like speaks to trans readers, because like even though that is something that like in some stories like we want to we may like use as catharsis or want to like represent or read about that experience, it's not necessarily something that like we all want to see or like think is like something that is it's not like general entertainment, and it's certainly not what we want to read like in an anthology that's supposed to celebrate our community. So it made me feel very like uplifted, and made me feel that even though like this story like has like so much like heart and so much like drama and stuff, that it's not coming from a place that is exploitative.
It felt safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So now that we're all decided to talk about the escapade, this was my plan all along. I want to ask specifically Ro and Ted about if there's anywhere that the idea of doing this Peanuts comics style thing came from. If you have like any particular...
Charlie Jane wrote that in the script. There's like Peanuts type cartoon thing, so he felt sad to do a proper homage to Peanuts in it. So
yeah, like, that was 100% requested right at the start of the thing, and so it's just a case of us trying our best to deliver as closely as we could without being legally liable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. I figure because like the way the narrative is like very, very like put together and very like clearly the essence in the present match very well with the flashbacks. I figure that would be like that would be also on Charlie Jane's head of like, we have to do something like this.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously there were some discussions about how we were going to fit it onto the page and all of that, like, and so it took a little while of discussion before we kind of landed on the exact shaping and format for them. But yeah, I think they did turn out really well. And definitely some of my favorite bits of the.
They were very fun to do.
Yeah.
Very fun to draw a little wailing Sheila going. Ah!
It was nice being able to, because even when you're doing the distress in that, I mean, like you said, it feels a lot safer. It's not indulgent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You would never want to
Yeah.
traumatize people.
God, no.
And I think as other people said, especially with mutant stories, we are very used to crowd beating scenes and suicide contemplation scenes, and there are artists and writers who have really traded on those in dangerous ways before. Rhayne and the Frat Boys. Nobody needed that. Nobody needed that. And so there's a threat that hangs over the minute you have mutant involved in it that I think is different even than when you have queer hanging over it, so to speak, or just being a superhero story. The mutant stories, we know it can get rough, and we know some people, to make a political point or to try to make an audience who doesn't want to empathize, they'll go really hardcore. Mm-hmm. And that Peanut style, that really helped, being like, okay, it's gonna, it's not gonna get too bad. It's gonna be all right. Mm-hmm. Should it have to do that? Maybe not, but it did the job and I think we're all grateful for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that because, like, I think it's on the medium, on the way that you communicate things. If you do that in that style, you already know that probably like some harsh topics are gonna come up, but not in a way that is gonna traumatize you. Because like the way the newspaper thing did was pretty much like that. There was like ethical questions put there, but it's not like in a way that's gonna like really get you away from the page. Also, they're just adorable.
Absolutely. I want merch.
The gender euphoria panel, just my heart. It's just so warm.
Yeah, that one is so beautiful with all the hearts.
Yes.
Oh.
Something I do want to mention, and oh God, please charge it to my head and my heart if I get this incorrectly, because I'm not trans. But I know, like with seeing the Peanut style, I really appreciate that, because what I've found is that there's a lot of emphasis placed on whether you pass or not to a group of people who are not trans, and this even includes gay and lesbian people and whatnot. And what I do like, and I don't know if this was intentional, but with the Peanuts characters, those are just children. So they look like kids. They have big heads, and little bodies, and even more so than like the present day stuff. Those are just children. Those are just two children who are trans. They're not, oh, but that character's breasts are so big, so they can't possibly be, or that one had like I just there's something about reading this and just getting the story and not getting a whole lot of how am I saying this? Like just going back to my earlier point, I think a lot of times it comes down to body parts and what you look like based off the perception of people who are not trans. Like, well, are you really trans because you don't look, exactly like my mother does, versus like, so I do appreciate that. And again, I don't know if it was intentional, but I think that was very smart, coming from someone who isn't trans. That's what I appreciated about it.
The thing with the Peanuts style characters is like if you take away all the fine details, everyone's actually basically the same shape. It's small details. It's like otherwise they're all the same character in terms of basic bald head and the. If you compare like the shape of the trousers compared to a dress from a different character, it's the same shape just with slightly different lines put on it.
Yeah, I mean, like as far as you say about like the whole kind of passing thing, that was also very much something we were conscious of. So like in the early design phases, we like had detailed discussions with Charlie, Jane, and the editors about like how much of how
far through
transition were both of them, like, because we wanted to make sure that we were accurately representing the body types of the level of transition that they had achieved, which is also important, like, because there are a great many stages that you go through within transition, and and each transition is so unique to the person. So it's like it was really important to make sure that we kind of had a long discussion at the start to like nail down exactly like where both of them were and make sure that we could show that properly.
And I gotta point out one thing. I think it also helps in the Peanuts stuff. It also helps that they're kids, and kids generally are pretty much like very alike other kids. Like that's a thing that happens in the real world. It's not also about cartoons, and like we like construct ourselves as gendered people as we grow.
Right.
Not generally like. I mean, obviously there's like a lot of like artificial signifiers of gender, like dressing little kids in blue or pink or whatever the shit, and but like the like if you look at kids, especially trans kids, these are kids like other trees, like other kids are kids. It's not gonna like I don't think they're as over-gendered as some people try to make it seem, because like gender is a thing that we construct over time and we relate to other people and make decisions and like chains and whatever. But it's not like if you're like 9 or 10, if you're like trans or you're one gender or another, it's gonna like look completely different, you know.
Yeah, I think like a lot of the like quote unquote like gender markers or whatever, those are things that happen like after puberty, whenever that happens. So like most children just kind of like they just look the same.
Yeah.
So, and I also think it's like really great that that so much thought was like put into like their character design and like where they were and like their transitions, and like it felt like, I don't know, it like felt like I was looking at like people that I knew. I don't know how to describe it, but I feel like maybe the way that trans people are illustrated by people who don't care, or maybe their only idea of what a trans person looks like is like, I don't know, if they Googled trans person. I feel like there's a difference somehow, but I felt I love the art style and the colors. Though I don't think the colorist is here, but it was just all
No,
so beautiful
it's
altogether.
Tamra Bombilane, the colorist.
Huh?
The colorist is Tamra Bombilane. I have this whole creative team that like I know everyone who work in this thing.
One thing that you had said is the intent that was given to their design, and what makes me the happiest about that is it's to both of them. And you know, there's a lot of fanfare for Escapade, but we got 2 new trans mutant characters in this comic, and I'm so glad that Morgan wasn't a throwaway, that Morgan got the same intent, and I want to see Morgan as much as I want to see Escapade. And I'm super excited and happy that we got these 2 characters, these 2 friends, both with intent, both with great designs. And I do disagree with the comic. I think turning anything into chocolate is a pretty badass power. And under the right circumstance, Morgan could kick some major ass. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Like, I don't want to get touched by the Midas touch of chocolate. No, thank you. You win that fight. So I hope we see both of them.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I think there's a point of like it's only inorganic matter that can be turned into chocolate. Because I was like, he could really kick ass by turning people into chocolate. It was like, that's murder.
But then to be fair, like, even if it's only inorganic stuff, like if they could set it up as a reflex, then like, you know, second a weapon touches them, just turns into chocolate. Like it would mean that, you know, that would massively blunt impacts of any sort of weapons.
I think it was only inorganic matter, wasn't it?
Or
did we have a talk about maybe you could turn a bomb into chocolate, and that was the problem, it couldn't do that.
I think it was inorganic.
I know there's limitations, but I can't remember what it was.
But even with those limitations, like Morgan is the best thief. What wall made of chocolate is gonna keep anybody out? Like,
Yes. Hard agree.
But it's just someone you'd want around. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
For the chocolate.
One thing I considered when reading through this, since we're talking about Morgan's just phenomenal power, is, and I don't know if this is good or bad, like take it how you will, but I was thinking 10 years from now, 5 years from now, when we get a secondary mutation, like what does that mutation look like? Like, is it now? Is it, you know, is it all food based? And then even if that's the case, there is a way to make everything dark. So there's definitely going to be some like Morgan is running this like, I don't know, arsenal of like I don't know, just like something I could just see. And I'm like, man, I'm happy that we're getting these characters, and this may be putting the cart before the horse, but I'm loving imagining what does this look like 3 years from now in these comics. And these characters who you can't, as we mentioned before, you can't write this away. You can't say, oh, well, this was all a fever dream. No, this is what happened on panel. like their everything about like there's nothing. You'd have to really do some very intentional, powerful retconning to erase any of this. And so I love the pushback against Emma. I love the expression of identity. I love the story. One thing that I look at when watching or reading anything that involves superpowers is if we take the powers out of it, is this still an interesting story? And like their story, that friendship, that I don't know if there's some romance there. Maybe I was just like projecting, but I was like that ending. I'll come back every day and for you, and like, oh, hold up, So I'm gushing over this because I'm a champion for representation, and I have something to point you to. Every June, I try to kind of fall in line with big corporations and do like Pride episodes, just because it's like more people are looking for Pride stuff then. And a lot of times I can't find trans characters. Like I can, but it'll be one issue of this comic, and it was not ideal to give to the audience as like this is your entry character, but like it may be selfish on my part, but I have like 2 characters to like point you to at any time of the year. Like just check this out. So I don't know. Again, I'm just like fanning over here because I thoroughly enjoyed the story. So that's it.
Yeah.
So I have kind of a question for everyone. So when these anthologies come out, especially the queer ones, I default just assume, and I just decided to at some point, that everybody that shows up in one is queer. We don't have any straight characters in these. That's just how it goes, which to me puts a spin on Emma in that story, especially.
Oh,
And
we're gonna talk about this.
Yeah, I just wonder how everybody feels about this, in specific with Emma, but also in a more generalized sense.
I want to go first, because Travis, you know a lot about this. You are making this question because of reasons, and I think I'm not sure. I'm also pretty sure that if I asked Charlie James, he wouldn't be able to give me like an honest answer on this, probably. But I don't think it's like I don't think it's by chance that the mentor of this new trans character is Emma Frost, because she has been noted at, painted at, like Grant Morrison pretty much wanted to make her trans. That's the thing that Grant Morrison has said, and that's the thing that is like kind of in the book a little bit, because like Travis, and I'll redirect people to like Travis Examining New X-Men book, which is a really cool book about New X-Men. In the episode 4, I'm the editor, so I know the episodes. In the like chapter 4 of the book, which is online in our page, which talk about bodies. I don't know if it's part 1 or part 2 of the bodies thing, but in one of those parts, Travis talks about Emma's body, and specifically in New X-Men, there's implications about Emma having had a bottom surgery. So that's a thing that happened in a book in the 2000s. And now we have a new trans character, which is like just developing as a teen, and who so happens to be her mentor, Emma Frost. And I'm like, that for me makes it. Like that for me makes it like, oh, this is a trans storyline with a trans mentor. I'm not even sure that like Marvel would go that far, because that's a long way to go, because you have to like make Emma Frost, which is a really famous character, a trans woman, and that's difficult to put in a book. But for those of us who are paying attention, it definitely reads that way. And especially with like, there's a couple of lines of Emma talking about how she kind of understands what Escapade is going through, what Stella is going through, and it's like, you understand it for no particular reason. so that's anyone now can go. I had to do it.
I do think that aside, I think that Emma's use here makes a lot of sense narratively, with Emma being a teacher, being a leader of Krakoa, being someone that Destiny would actually go to, and being someone that could put that vision in Escapade's head. But also, I do definitely see that, if we're able to finally get that Emma is trans story, this is going to be one of those comics that people are going to be able to pull up and say, it's been there for years.
Yeah.
This isn't something new. So I do think it definitely fills both those roles, and it just makes me love it even more.
Yeah, I definitely need to look more into Morrison and Emma, because I think I've heard like vaguely about that, but I'd really love to know more. And I do feel like it is definitely, like, even if it's not meant to be that like Emma is trans, just like picking Emma specifically is very it just makes sense. Like Emma is so popular and so important to a lot of queer and trans people, and so it's kind of like putting an icon in this story.
There we go.
And I don't know, it just makes sense. Like, of course it's Emma Frost. Like she's for the girls, the gays, the theys. Like
yeah. I agree. I wasn't aware of the kind of transness of Emma, but that is a route that I would love to see fulfilled. Mainly because we hold a lot of these characters to our hearts, much like everybody else. But with them being fictional characters, there's always the threat of, oh, you're just doing it for diversity's sake when you change something. But like you said, having the Grant Morrison conversation as well as this one, I think I would love to see Emma as a trans woman like that. Whatever. But that aside, because I can run down the list of things. But that aside, Emma, I go back to the Generation X days where like I'm this reformed villain, and she's been the most consistent of a lot of these characters, like in every single book, every iteration. And to have her, oh my god, I thought about her because I was like, well, what? There could have been any number of telepaths, but when I really sat with it, I was like, I can't really see. Like Jean, I'm sure could do it, but like, would this feel right? And with the villain pact of like childhood of let's be villains who do bad things to bad people who deserve it. It's like having Emma there, this reformed villain who was like a top tier villain for years. Like even that, I was like, what a perfect pair. And like, what does that look like going forward when we get to New Mutants and when we get to the expiration of the other books? Like having Emma as your mentor, like in text on page, it's like, I don't want to say you're riding her coattails, but you're like on fast track to like success. Like at least being visually everywhere. I would just give me an Emma book where she's just training this trans woman how to use her powers, and like I don't know. I think Emma was a solid choice, and I that couldn't have been anyone else.
And also, like taking back on the point that Ro and Ted said earlier, it also gives the opportunity to having like a character who is going through her transition, being taught by a character who has gone through hers like long time ago. Because if we ascribe this headcanon as true, Emma transitioned like ages ago because we didn't know she was trans,
And like thinking about that, like so much about like Emma's backstory is like very like trans, like the fact like she grew up like in an abusive household. Now that's like specifically trans, but I'm getting somewhere. And she and her basically like having to like cut ties with like her entire family, and like having to like do like things like doing like bad things to survive or survival sex work, which is not bad. I'm mixing up my words, but like, you know what I mean? Like, she had to
No,
go through a lot and had to do a lot of things that she might not have done otherwise to survive. And she had, like, she talks very frankly about like completely like changing her body like through surgery. I think that is like a point in the Morrison comics, and like, I feel like, because sometimes with like ideas about like trans headcanons and stuff, it can kind of feel difficult to like figure out like how to implement that into their like past history. But with Emma, it's like it slots in perfectly. Like it makes sense, and even like the animosity that her father had towards her, like it could play into that as well. And since he hated Christian so much, you can like see that, and you can see why Christian and Emma connected so much. Like it's really it's fair.
It's Christian is gay. Yeah,
And,
that makes.
And I will say also with Emma, with her being such one of the most skilled telepaths, all of the stories we've had about Emma's past is from Emma. And
come on,
that is very easy to fit into the trans narrative and have it work so smoothly.
Oh.
Well, and in the arc where we learn about her surgeries, Jean is very intimate with her during that. And when she's down for the surgeries, her body becomes formless. It's very much a lump of flesh. And just to pull this back, I mean, when I had to have surgeries when I was younger, because I'm intersex, and so I had to have surgeries every few years. As things would change and mature, they'd be like, we're going to cut some more stuff up and move some more stuff around. And it felt very much like that. Like I didn't really think about that until we were doing the book, when I was doing the book with Duna. And I was like, oh, that's why I relate to that. Those panels is like, that's what that, if I remember back, or I think back, I probably don't think of like myself now lying down on, for surgery. Like that's what it felt like. But we also have stories like the Anna Senti short story, where they talk about abuse and why Emma stays with the Hellfire Club. And a big part of why she stays with the Hellfire Club is she is defining her sense of being a woman and being a strong woman with standing by this abusive position that she's in. And it's very locked in, which is not necessarily a trans issue, but cis gender is as performative as any gender, and it's locked up in the same weird toxic stuff that we get into.
Oh, yeah.
In the last show, we made Mystique trans. In this show, we're making Emma trans. That's I'm here like for the representation.
We won't stop until everyone is.
Emma in this story actually reminded me a lot of because I'm doing a Larry Hama column right now, and when Mystique shows up in Hama's Wolverine, she picks up Wolverine at a bar, and she's got all her lines are men's lines. She wants to beat him at pool and then teach him how to play pool. And then she's like, do you want to come back to my hotel room and see, the painting on the wall of the hotel room? It's very coded in a very specific, she picked Wolverine up. And the lines that she uses are not lines we are used to seeing a woman use in that. Whereas Wolverine is the waif at the bar. I mean, when she approaches him and he just sits at the bar and he's pretty boy at the bar, and she picks up. Emma in this, I mean, she's not picking anyone up, but her arrival in it and her tone of control felt very similar to me in that way. And it was the first X book I connected it to. There's an approach, and I think a lot of X characters could have that because we have this tradition of gender fluidity and queerness in a tonal sense. I think with a lot of the characters that it's very easy to make mutant characters queer in a broad sense, not even just saying, oh, this character's gay, this character is this specifically you can move them around in ways that you can't really move around the Avengers
Right.
as easily.
I agree.
You can make Wolverine anything. You can make Emma or Mystique. And not in a metaphorical way. I mean, in a very literal way. You can make Mystique trans. You can make Mystique gay. You can make Mystique bi. And there's not really a good argument for saying, well, Mystique can't be that.
I agree.
The only thing Mystique can't be is heterosexual.
And then we'll find some weird alternate reality where I'm still mad at Blaine being straight in one alternate reality or whatever it was ever. There'll be one of those, but even in that one, she's just really quiet about it.
She's just really deep in the closet. Give her time. She'll get there.
Okay, so now I want to ask you, Ro and Ted, about the design, because I really, really like the design of both characters, but I'm going to focus a little bit on Escapade because he's the one that has the kind of superhero suit type of shit. And I like it a lot. I want to ask you both where the inspiration came from. First, I'm going to say that for me, when I was watching it the first time, and maybe it's because of the way the story develops, Destiny goes there and with Emma and all of this happened, but it gave me very Kitty Baby Kate Pride vibes. It gave me vibes of new X-Men character is introduced and they have this cool style, or even Jubilee, that type of introduction story. And I don't know if that's something that you had in mind when doing the design or not. So yeah.
Not for me particularly.
No, I mean, well, when we were having the initial discussion about design work stuff, leaving aside, all the body, all the body notes and stuff that we're talking about,
just talking about clothes,
just for the clothes. And when we came on, they already had the idea that they wanted the jumpsuit, and so they kind of gave us a clothing company who made the sort of jumpsuits that they wanted.
But we suggested the yellow.
Yeah, and
because you wanted an April O'Neil vibe.
I know a lot of queer people who like April O'Neil, so and it's also the yellow is a very classic X-Men color, so it was good.
Yeah,
good too. But the jacket was our idea because the initial thought before we turned up was a trench coat. Well, no, it wasn't blue.
Oh, not blue.
A big trench coat.
It was a big trench coat.
Because the kind of say, would it be like a practical version of a cloak, or a cape?
Okay.
But then the problem that
they also wanted a tool belt.
Yeah, and so we were pointing out, if you're wanting to really access a tool belt, if you want to get to the back pockets of that, you have to go under your trench coat. It's it's going to be a liability. So the moto jacket was an easier choice for it. I mean, and as for the colours, well,
that's based on our hand towels. We have
I love that.
Teal and yellow hand towels.
I love that. I mean, it works.
Very much so.
The whole I love the design because it very much to me seemed exactly like what she is, a teenager who wants to Robin Hood supervillain, with the goggles and the jacket, the whole 9 yards. It seemed real, just like the character did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, the whole thing was we were trying to make sure it all looked like something that
they cobbled together.
Yeah, so it's something that someone very smart could make, but that you could make. If you're in a superhero universe and you're smart, you could just eventually put that shit together yourself. You don't need a Richards lab. You don't need anything like that.
Set up, do it yourself, Queen.
With the propulsion system on the hands and the boots, that there was brought up the idea that she either had scavenged them from
just they're basically bits that had fallen off Iron Man.
Yeah.
I'm with it.
And the gloves, I really like the gloves. that she has, like for the gloves there.
So, yeah, that was essentially just some regular fingerless gloves that some propulsors had like been knitted into type thing. So.
Well, I think it's a very easy thing for someone to forget is that when a character is making this costume, what do they have access to? What can they really work with? I remember being when I was young. There's a prose origin of Spider-Man that Peter David wrote, and in it, Peter Parker gets just regular nylons from the grocery store, but then somehow silk screens and sews the hose. And this bothered me as a kid. I was like 12 years old or whatever. I was like, no. This doesn't work. You can't. And I think it's not even a slight. I can slight Peter David if I feel like it. That's not even a slight against Peter David. I think for a lot of writers, for a lot of artists, that's an easy thing to forget, that these things are made of materials and that materials react certain ways, or that the trench coat will get in the way. There are a lot of artists who just would never show the trench coat getting in the way, but the trench coat would probably also look like it was made of paper or something. There's a lot of fabric issues and design issues in superhero comics and comics in general. So yeah, I love the costume and I love the color scheme and I love that it was thought through. It really looked like something you could take that apart and put it back together again.
Great.
No, I was just gonna say, I'll be honest, Spider-Man, this 15-year-old science nerd, always being able to any version is always able to make this costume out of scratch. Always baffled me. Like, dude is a biochemist and a seamstress all at the same time. But this design, it looked like something, she could have thrifted. And I love that.
For me, two things I considered with the outfit were cosplay, how easy this may be for folks to cosplay in the same way that she would have had to like scrounge for these materials. I think this is one that, especially with Squid Games having come and gone, you could just cut the sleeves off your Squid Games outfit. But the other thing was also an action figure. Like, I would love to like own this design, like, because I have like a Jubilee with that leather coat, that plastic or whatnot. But that's something that I consider as well, as how many of these cosplayers will we see at conventions or even during Halloween, and then what would it look like to hold this particular character with the hands that remove, that may be just regular hands, and then maybe ones with the glove that light up like something. And it really goes for a lot of the characters, but for her specifically, because like the colored hair, like all of it is like, I have a Jubilee action figure and I loved it when I got it, but like I see so much more potential with this character just because. So that's something I'm looking forward to.
I'm gonna lose my shit the first time I see a cosplayer in the full outfit. Like,
Look.
I am excited for that.
That would be very cool.
I'm not sure what I'd do with
And
that.
I have seen, I've already seen people on Twitter talk about who do toy mods or make the toys, and I've already seen them discuss the character as a character that's very toyetic and that they would like to work on. So there's no licensing money in that, so sorry there. But,
Okay, kind of closing on Escapade a little bit. I want to ask Ro and Ted what this story meant for you both, because you did the art, but maybe like the script when it arrived, like what you felt, because every one of us has said here like a bunch of things of what it means to us. So it's your turn.
Well, I was a bit wary of working with Marvel on a Pride story before we found out Charlie Jane would be writing the script, because I don't know a lot about Marvel's representation stuff previously, but I'd heard some people were unhappy with some of the things that had come out of it. So hearing that Charlie Jones would be doing the script was quite a relief. Then she's got a pedigree. She knows what she's talking about. She's trans herself, and so has the experience. And it was very good to know that it wasn't going to be just like this commercial thing written by someone who didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of trans friends, and the last couple of years have been exceptionally shitty for trans people.
Yeah.
They really have. And like, we don't have the power to do much, but having the ability to make people feel seen in a way that is actually rewarding and beneficial was at least something that was very exciting to be able to offer them for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're very glad to have it.
Yeah. It felt pretty much like an oasis in the middle of all this shit. Like,
Yeah.
It actually, like, for me, like, because I had not, like, since Destiny of X has started, so basically the beginning of this year, I hadn't read like any X-Men comics. I was just like, I can't deal with this anymore. But I hadn't read any new X-Men comics rather, but this is what made me be like, yeah, I need to get back into this, because the way it made me feel was like, I want to see if I can experience something like this with what is coming out now, and that's what like powered me to like read the rest of like all of what has come out of New Mutants since I stopped reading. I think it was like issue 13 or something like that, and that was like really meant a lot to me. So I don't know, it just like made me excited about comics again.
Good.
That's good to hear.
yeah, I think this story, and not only this story, because like, I mean, we are having like a lot of things right now that we didn't have like this, like past year by this state, because like we already saved them, like Destiny and Mystique and Richter and Shatterstar and Rachel and Betsy and all those things. But I think having this particular story has made that kind of impact in a lot of people, of like, oh, I need to go read X-Men comics again, or like, I'm excited about X-Men comics again, because we didn't have before this one any trans story that really like acknowledged the trans character. I mean, in the 90s, but not now. So like that was like really important to have, or to just to like have something to look forward to, because like, you know, for all the subtext X-Men comics have, they have been like pretty non-explicit, and they haven't had any trans characters in the spotlight till now. So that's really a reason to like be more excited and continue doing a podcast. You know, because sometimes I get like, you know, we do Mutant Wars, and sometimes I'm like, I really love X-Men, but I really need them to like catch up with the war. And that's what is happening. And that's what I feel with this story. Like, finally there's something I can talk about, which is not like the same things I'm always like rambling about, because I want them to like move forward, if that makes sense. So next question, and this is a very open one, but maybe we can like pick up the things that we haven't really like talk about this while, is where each one of you sees that representation in the X-Men comics is. Like, how do you see the themes playing out? How do you see the stories, or how do you see, and where do you want to see it more in the future? That would be the question.
Well, for me, I will say I'm not caught up, so some of this may apply already. But from what I've read over the years, and even during the dawn of X, I think it's great that we're getting these characters, but I don't like that they're not specific enough. And when I say that, I'm referring to like a specific experience. Like, okay, so if you've seen Paris is Burning, there's a very particular black and brown house community that, like, how has this never existed in comics? If we look at something like Brokeback Mountain as a jump off point, there are men in that space, that cowboy space, that have these relationships. If we look at even in and for me, the only thing I have with trans and media to kind of jump off from is like Paris is Burning and also Pose. But when we look at the very specific communities, that because it's easy, I feel, to just write a story. Kelly is trans, Marcus is gay, but it feels like, well, where is the specificity? Because I could very well be 30 plus black gay man who was in a house when I was a ballroom house when I was 16. How does that affect the character now? So I feel like you can just say, okay, well, think. If we made him queer, what would that look like? You've had relationships with Monet, you've had a kind of sort of interaction with Jubilee, you're a black man from St. Louis. If you were queer in your past experience, what does that look like now? Being on the X-Men, being the leader of the being having your omega level. Like I feel like as much as we move forward, I want to see those specific kind of what is it sex of different identities, because I may learn that there's a motorcycle gang that actually exists in Iowa where they're just like all queer women, like I want that, because I feel like we've been beat over the head with mutants are different and this is a stand-in for marginalized people. That's apparent, but now give me some specifics that folks can actually latch on to. Oh, I went to this club in the 80s, or and not just AIDS and the legacy virus. Like, give me specific queer LGBTQ spaces and things that you can put these mutants in that'll shake up things a bit. They'll be a little bit more interesting. Like, to see all of Generation X and New Mutants go out on the town and go to a ball, like at the taping of Legacy, like Legendary. Like, there's so many different things that you can do. That's what I'm hoping for. That's what I would love to see.
Yeah, I definitely feel like when people tend to like write characters, and it might be because of the time constraints or something, but I feel like they don't, like, I guess, dissect like each part of the character and like imbue that all into like the way they act, the way they speak, the slang they use, like the references they make. And also I feel like part of that is like very like connected to like characters of color as well, because like a lot of the writers are white and therefore like write from a white experience, when like there's so much like outside of that. It's like kind of that idea of like white being the default or the norm or something. Meanwhile, like these characters will be like black and brown, but somehow not talk about or mention like things that black and brown people may have experience with or talk about. It's kind of like the way that like a black character in a comic book may speak may not be how a real life person of their same experience and location or backstory would speak. So I don't know. I just wish I could see more of that.
Well, and I think, in a weird way, I'm really happy that Berto has a bar, right now because
A disco
no one's
bar.
no one's going to go to Blob's Tiki Bar anymore, which is, I'm sorry, but Tiki bars are fucking racist. So right
Yeah.
there, period. Plus, it's fucking Blob, who's a misogynist going way back. So sorry to swear all of a sudden, drop all this, but that bar bothers me, and that it's the community center of Krakoa. That's why I will never live there, because you let a misogynist run a tiki bar before you had welfare checks on community checks. That's why. And community feels very, that's over there. That's like a neighborhood you don't go to. Or we used to be terrified to go to like Santa Barbara. And like, I remember like Santa Barbara was like scary, because anytime you went to Santa Barbara and you go to the grocery store, there was always, I'm the lightest person in my family. So I'm the person you send in to get the table at the restaurant, right? But then you get in there and they don't want to serve everybody. They're suddenly closing early, or they don't have those meals there. That's what Krakoa felt like to me because of things like the Tiki Bar. And so Berto having his bar there and having his disco bar, that's a space people are going to go to. That's a space you could at least try out.
Right.
And like the other one, I'm not even going to try that out. But there are communities, and I think X-Men has had a very hard time with the fact that there are communities that are not based in being a mutant. When you brought up bikers a minute ago, I thought about, there's a movie from the early 70s called Pink Angels.
Yeah.
And it's about gay bikers, and it's very silly and very goofy, and you know, they speed up the film at some points. And at the end of the movie, they go from town to town and have adventures. They go to one town, and the next scene is they're all hung. The town killed them. The end of the movie. That's the end of Pink Angels. Like, it's a comedy up until that last moment. And it was very, gay people are okay, but gay people are like everybody else. Gay people are who this town fucking killed. And then it ends. But that there was a biker community in that. Or the anthology film series, She Likes Girls, which is a series of short films about different sapphic relationships in different parts of the world. And some of them are fantasy films. There's one about the Pied Piper coming down and being like the perfect girlfriend because she's imaginary, basically. There's another about a girl who is kind of trans, kind of not, but she dresses like one of the Beatles to try to go impress this girl she likes, and gets into it. It all becomes a whole thing. We all have these experiences. We have specific communities. Storm, in order to have kind of a community, had to become like a Black Panther character, which is really weird. And there's that version of the crew where she hangs out with Misty, and Misty just gives her shit all the time because Misty's like really resi, but from New York. And Storm is not. Storm is a queen who has been living in this big mansion in upstate New York. And just that upstate New York versus New York City thing, that doesn't get explored in X books. We can have people from very different communities, and they just want it to kind of come down to that mutant thing, or to come down to what team you're on. And I've never felt that. Like, I've never been on a superhero. I say that like I've been on a superhero team. I've never felt like a school pride that way. I've never felt, a work pride thing. Like I like Comic Watch, and I like working with Comic Watch, but doing tell everybody, like, I don't hang out in the Slack chat all the time for that. And it's great for the people that do. But same thing for schools, like, any school that I went to or any school that I worked for, like, I wasn't like, that school is the best school. I was like, it's got a little bit of both. And X-Men don't have that. They have the X-Force people, and they have the New Mutants and the Generation X kids, and they don't cross over. Even if they have other connections, they have cultural connections, ethnic connections, class connections. I would freak out over some of like the super rich kids that are on some of these teams. It would, there's a lot of it. Or you find out that one of the teachers in one of these things used to be like a card-carrying Nazi or participate in the Sentinel program. It never freaks them out.
Ever.
So I want to see that kind of community show up. And do I have a lot of faith that it's going to? No, but I would like to. I would like to see it.
One thing that I would like to see, and I love the voices issues. I loved Escapade, and I love the LGBTQD. story. But I have a lot of hope because we get that little teaser at the ending that Escapade is moving into New Mutants. But also, I've been burned by Marvel and by DC and by media in general, where it's like, here is this very special issue. This is a very special episode. And then we do not see these characters until the next time they need to
Yep.
pull them out front stage. I'm going to call out DC a little bit. I'm a huge Apollo at Midnighter fan, but there was a big chunk of time where they only came out when they needed a gay couple. And now that there are more queer characters, I've not seen them for a while. And having Escapade already slated for New Mutants gives me a lot of hope that we're not going to get that happen this time. And I hope that we get that same focus for everyone else. I hope we see Morgan. I hope they're mutants. I hope we see Pity Girl and Good Arson and the other person whose name I can't pronounce with the cool ice powers. I want to see them more. I want Jessie Drake back. We had her back in the last Voices issue after like 20 years of no one mentioning Jessie Drake. And then after the Voices issues, Jessie Drake went right back wherever she's been that they won't tell us. And I want it to stick around. I want it to be lasting change.
And the worst part of that is that we got Jessie Drake, and we got confirmation that Jessie Drake is queer, like she's into girls, and then she went away.
And cameos are not hard. I mean, the gala stuff showed that. I can't tell you offhand who celebrities showed up in the gala, but the fact that we can shove celebrities into an X book means that we can shove queer characters into the X book. We can do this.
And we, for the most part, we haven't even gotten that many queer characters in the background of these like splash pages. I think we got Simon, the second Pyro, unconscious on the floor once, and then every now and then Bling and Mercury and Loa show up in the background, and that's pretty much it. And like it's so much easy. You can just put them there. They live there. Just where's Jessie Drake? Just acknowledge that she's real. Is she a fever dream? I want to see it more.
I lost count of who was answering what. I don't know if it's my turn or maybe yes.
I think it's your turn, Duna.
It's always my turn when I say shit like that. Okay, so I'm very positive this year. Last year I was not positive. If you go back and watch or so of LGBT plus representation last year, I was hella pissed off. Like because we did have like the whole anthology and it didn't have like proper trans representation, and it had like some really awful like trans shit that didn't need to go there. So I was like really not into it. And the only story with Jessie Drake didn't even mention she was trans, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but the fact that she has disappeared for the whole year after that just proves my point that it wasn't like the best idea. But as of today, 1 year later, I'm really hopeful because, especially for escapades, let's be clear. Like, I brought Ro and Ted here because, like, I was like, yeah, that's the story which I have like most hope in, which in one way is like great because we finally have like a trans storyline in the X books, and it's gonna be something more than just like it has a strength as a story. It's something that gets you in. It's something that I can see going for an arc or two, and like getting to know and like grow with these characters. I can easily be Sela being as iconic as Kitty or Jubilee in 10 years from now. I can easily see it. In fact, I think Marvel will have to screw up really, really bad for it to not happen. So that's a lot of hope I have in her. But at the same time, I mostly have hope in her in the way that I don't. Okay, so that changed a lot how I feel about if everything else had happened, but that hadn't happened, I would probably still feel a little bit like, this is not going anywhere. Because, like, as much as I love what is happening with Mystique and Irene in Immortal X-Men, as much as I love Marauders and the fact that everyone on that team is queer and they're just having space adventures, I think that's a great idea. I think Steve Orlando like really nailed that. Just a bunch of queers making jokes in space. Love it. As much as I love Knights of X and especially like the fact that we're finally getting Rachel somewhere, I don't know, 30 years later, like it's time. As much as I love those things, these are things that I was kind of already expecting to be there by now. These are like more like bare minimums for me. And in some way, I really hope that the fact that New Mutants is getting this type of like I don't want to say anthology book, but it's getting like more writers into it and it's getting more things. I really hope that shows to Marvel that they can like really risk it with new characters, because like I feel like part of the reason why all the trans characters that Vita Ayala created are not happening, are not existing anywhere in the books right now is because there is not enough like, you know, like they don't feel like a things that people would buy. So they're you know, they don't see like a market value in that. So I just hope that having an escapade story that just like goes off the rails and is super popular and whatever makes Marvel realize that they can actually put trans characters in books. And that's not gonna make the books sell less. It probably will make them sell more. But yeah, I hope they learned the lesson, and that's why I'm really hopeful, because I think that this is a good way to do it. And I don't know, I'm thankful. I'm sorry for like just flossing you with love, but I'm thankful for RO and TED because like I think it's really important for things like this, for like characters, the design, and if people like it, and if it's visually appealing, it's like half of the job of getting a character to get to people. And people are loving the design. Like everyone is loving the character. So that's great. That's I'm thankful because if a character was this good but it looked like shit, I would still need them to be like part of a storyline. I would still need all of that, but I wouldn't probably get it because that's not how comics work. They're a visual medium. So so I'm thankful for you both and for this design to be like so eye-catching, because that way we can catch people's eyes and let them understand that we need trans storylines. That would be my thing. And where I hope this goes is obvious. I really hope that Marvel go like that more trans characters appears, especially because like I mean, in the realm, going to the realm of indie comics, we have been having like indie comics about trans issues for some years now. Not a lot of years. This has been going since 2013 or something like that. That we have had more books about trans characters or having trans characters on them. So I assume that Marvel needs to catch up. I hope this is the opportunity for Marvel to catch up, because this arrives to a lot of people, to a lot of children, and to a lot of parents of children, and that's where it's important that we have like superheroes and people like that who saw that we are human, because that's something that apparently needs to be shown.
Well, I think for me, it was very important that this story come out right now, while even recently, but over the last, half year, we've had several comics pros really get into the who passes, who doesn't pass game. And that's some manga people, it's some superhero writers, it's some fixers who run cons and these big events. It's more than one person. It's been kind of a wave, but a few just recently, kind of loudly, and that's scary as hell. That's not. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your bona fides are from before. And they feel safe doing it, I think, sometimes with fictional characters, because they can say, well, the fictional character doesn't pass. I'm not really hurting anybody. You're still hurting everybody doing that. It's not a game we need to be playing. And so a story that didn't even delve into that in any way, and that gender euphoria panel, that was it. That really gave me a hope that certain other people right now, and I don't want to name names because they're going to sue. And, I know some of them a little personally, and I know they're litigious, so I'm not getting sued. This gave me hope that they had taken away.
Yeah, and it's a good trans story when there's not like a mirror. Because I'm so grateful that in this story we didn't need like a whole thing about like them looking at the mirror and seeing whatever we've been having for a while. Because like you don't need that to show gender euphoria. You don't need like the whole like de-realization, depersonalization, which is a really cool stuff if you want to show it, but it's delicate. You have to do a lot of work. You can't do that in 20 pages. But yeah.
This is right up there for me with when Spider-Man realized he could skip down the street and sing a song when he's in Ms. Marvel's body. This was right up there. That's a high level.
Okay, little last question for Ro and Tess, since we're having you here, and I already asked this to every one of our guests every time, but who is your favorite X-Men character?
That's really tough.
Sorry.
I'm going to cheat a bit and say collectively the Wolverines.
Oh.
Fair. That's fair.
Like, I'm not going to pick one out of all of them, but yeah, just as a bunch.
That's messy.
I will say that the Krakoa age has done the most to turn me around on Cyclops that anyone's ever managed.
I haven't read a lot of comics, but was it Brew?
Yeah.
Brew which comic series?
Wolverine and the X-Men.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Brew.
Yeah, the Krakoa age has done the most to rehabilitate Cyclops after about 30 years of less characterization.
Yeah.
And because they basically made him back into what he ought to always have been, which was the mutant Captain America. Like, cause that's what his role always was and should have been. Like, he's the Steve Rogers for the mutants, and it's been so much of that like being chipped away. So yeah, I've never cared that they turned Beast into an absolute monster because, and he is a genuine monster now. It always felt kind of sucky that happened to Scott.
Yeah, I think it's like a result of like the whole Krakoa era. Just like it seems like for the first time in a long time, he appears actually happy.
And also much more morally centered than he's been for about 2 decades. Since the Morrison run, in fact. I think I'd say that was the last time he had the same level of moral clarity.
Well, and I mean, even right before that, he's the whole Search for Scott thing where he's hitting his wife and knocking her across the room. And we're like, yeah, that's our guy. That's our superhero. People are like, how did they ever break up after that? And I was,
Comics.
So I guess the best way to tidy this up is like we still don't know if Cycles, Wolverine, and Jean are a throuple. Marvel, we need confirmation.
Well,
The
yeah.
fanfics are writing themselves, and
Like we need Wolverine and Scott to consummate the relationship for this to
yes,
like
yes,
the
we
discourse
need that.
is too much. Just like make it happen, please.
Before,
I'll be honest, at this point, I would take an on panel saying that it's not happening. Just
Right.
for the love of God, give me an answer. The discourse online is overwhelming.
But
I
when
gotta
they
say-
say it's not happening, they need to be holding hands in the panel.
I gotta say that it's so funny because before we started the show, Gabriel was messaging me on Messenger, and they were like, I'm catching up on like, I haven't caught up on Wolverine, had caught up on Wolverine and X-Force and whatever, and I was like, no, I'm not reading those, and Gabriel was like, but what if we're making a Pride show and it turns out that the whole throuple thing is confirming X-Force? What if? What if?
Like, watch us be having this conversation and just Cyclops just laid one on Wolverine in the last Wolverine issue, and none of us know because we're just like, we're not going to read that one.
So yeah, I'm pretty sure that hasn't happened because it could have shown up in Twitter, unless everyone on Twitter is in the same spot that we are.
The gays just collectively gave up on Wolverine, and
Yo.
And it turns out Wolverine. Also, like X-Force, I think is the X book that is like for mature audiences. So if that's gonna happen, it's gonna be in that book. So we probably should be reading it, just in case. What a great way to end the show, talking about Wolverine and Scott. Okay, so thank you so much for everyone for coming, and especially thank you, Tef and Ro. It was really great to have you both here and to hear a little bit more about like how it was the whole creating Escapade and like the design, etc. Like, thank you so much, and thanks to Rhayne always for coming to our show.
Thank you.
And thank you, Eric, too. Like, I always love having you both. Like, top tier guests. And we'll do something next month, and then we're gonna like just for the people watching or the people that will watch this later, we'll do something next month because it's our 50th episode. It's our like big episode. So we're probably gonna do something big with that. I don't know yet what, but it's probably gonna be gay. Fuck it, stop doing gay things just because it's not Pride Month. Like, you know, we are gonna do it the whole year. And after that, I guess we'll take a break and do like season 2 of Mutant Woods after that. So just so people know, be attentive to July and be attentive to probably September or something like that. And yeah, thank you again all for coming, and this was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.